Shinkai's highly anticipated anime movie, Suzume no Tojimari, with two major hits recently, Kimi no Nawa and Weathering with You, two movies that I personally really love. Everyone is wondering how Shinkai's latest installment will stack up. Did it deliver? And how do I rank those three films? You might be surprised what I have to say about it. So just got back from the theater, here are my quick non-spoiler thoughts on it. So right off the bat, I know I keep on mentioning Weathering with You and Kimi no Nawa, and it's for a good reason. If you recall, Kimi no Nawa just blew up. It was the biggest movie since, I think, Spirited Away at the time. It was so beloved, they got so much attention, it made so much money. Then naturally, it would eventually grow to become so popular that people would just start finding reasons to dislike it or hate it. You may recall that Shinkai himself just started cracking under that pressure, telling people to stop watching his own movie. Fast forward to Weathering with You, that movie then had to prove itself. Not to mention there was that whole discussion about that somewhat controversial ending at the time. Whether you loved or hated those movies, one of the main issues or things to note from both of those movies is that it really felt like Shinkai made a very similar movie with Weathering with You. Because it really feels like Shinkai took that criticism to heart and just made this movie completely different. Which I think is a good thing for a lot of people. Suzume no Tojimari feels completely different when compared to those two movies. Shinkai's high school girl he focuses on this time is Suzume, which I'm gonna point out not as a criticism, but she does feel very similar to Mitsu and Hina from the previous two movies. Not really too much to say about Suzume, I liked her character. Just know Japanese schoolgirl, high school one. For the main guy lead character, you have Sauto, which thankfully he is pretty different from the previous two black-haired characters, whose names I forget. To make this guy even more distinct from the previous two, like you've seen in the trailers, he does spend a good amount of time in the movie as a freaking chair. Not gonna spoil why, you'll see. For MVP, I do have to mention Sato's bestie, his buddy. I mean, what this guy does, most of us would like to have a bestie like this dude. Moving into the core of this movie that makes it so different from the other ones, only touching on things you've seen in the trailer. Unlike the previous two that of course incorporate some type of magic, this has magic from the get-go, which helps right off the bat give it this very different vibe from them. Especially getting into some things towards the end of the movie, it has a very Ghibli vibe. And I'm talking about early Ghibli, which you're either gonna love or hate. I personally think it could have been done a little bit better, but I'm gonna get to that a little later. Animation wise, it is a Shinkai film. If you've seen any of the past movies, even in the ones before Kimi no Nawa, you know how freaking gorgeous, how much of an eyegasm. At the same time, unlike the previous movies like Kimi no Nawa, where you have like the meteor shower, Weathering with You, you're playing with water, you're playing with the sunlight. This doesn't really have that. So here's getting into one of my actual critiques about this movie. If you've seen the past two movies, if you're very familiar with Shinkai's films, this is gonna feel very familiar. Like, oh, that sunset. Hey, it looks like that sunset on top of the building with Weathering with You. That scene in the mountain, that scene outside, looks like that scene from Kimi no Nawa with Mitsu. Oh, Japan, Tokyo, those cities. Oh, you mean the ones from the previous few movies? And I want to emphasize that I'm not really trying to complain about it, but if you've seen those movies, just know that you're going to be getting more of those wonderful, very detailed images. For the actual animation, I was trying to think, what exactly is my issue here? And I think this time is that Shinkai trying to go with this very dark aesthetic. You've seen it in a trailer. It looks like Madoka, it looks like Fate, it looks like any character going into this berserk mode. It almost seems like he tried to take what he did in Weathering with You, but make this murky, gloomy version of it. I think it may even remind me of the Demon Slayer train movie where it's just a bunch of CG. And I do want to stress, I think it is hand-drawn first with CG to enhance it, not just a bunch of CG blobs. For the music, I think this is another place where I felt it was lacking. There's not really anything that stands out, except for the one song in the trailer, which I do believe is by Rad Wimps, since they're back here. You see that blasted all over TikTok. Like, I've been humming it, my girl's been humming it. It's gonna stay with you. Other things I randomly liked, Shinkai is known to set his movies in Tokyo, specifically in Shinjuku. This movie doesn't start in Tokyo. If you've seen from the trailers, you know they're going through various parts of Japan. I think that's a huge positive, giving love to other parts, especially the countryside. Another thing that I really found interesting from a storytelling point of view, that each time you have the characters going to a different spot in Tokyo, it felt like its own mini episode. Like this could have been broken down into chunks. Like, oh, you're in this city now, you're in this city now, new episode. And of course, there is a McDonald's here. I have the licorice flower in the mind, so I spotted those. And one of the things I like, since this is set in modern day, is just the usage of electronic payment, electronic money, just paying with your smartphone. For another random thing I really liked is that you have the main character Sauto spending most of the time as a chair. I loved how cute and just how animated they made it work. It almost seemed like they took inspiration from Pixar. But anyway, getting into I think what my biggest issue, if I do want to call it that, is that when I walked out, I'm like, yeah, that happened. Hopefully Black Panther tonight is better. And it's funny because I'm going to watch it 2 more times within the next week. What I'm trying to say is that this movie was enjoyable, but it felt like it was lacking something. And it might be that it was just lacking that emotional impact for me. For Kimi no Na wa, you had so many emotional moments I still remember and almost get in tears thinking about it. Weathering with You, not as big as emotional moments, but they were there. Then you have Suzume's door locking, which I think there were 2 movies that you were supposed to feel emotional based on what the movie was giving you, but I just felt they didn't hit home for me. And I think part of the reason that this just didn't work out too well for this movie was that some of the stuff surrounded or involving Suzume were really just not fleshed out enough. There's clearly something missing, which I'm curious. I want to read the book eventually and just to compare. And of course, there's going to be a manga version. So like that emotional bang. The ending of this movie actually felt like the fantasy stuff in Ghibli if Ghibli tried to go dark. And you do get more magical, mystical stuff compared to the other movies, but at the end, you just get like gallons and gallons. I don't think it worked out as well as it should have, but I do need to rewatch to make sure. For something that I've been thinking about ever since the movie ended, like the other few movies, there is this love element, and I felt it was borderline forced. And sure, you could say it's debatable whether the last 2 movies, whether the whole romance subplot worked out. I think it worked out less here. Like, don't get me wrong, I could understand having a crush, but you spend a few days together and you're now being in actual love? You lost me there. And I almost forgot to address the Twitter outrage in the room. You might have already been wondering it, but there is an age gap between the 2, which is high school student and college student. Unless I missed it, their ages aren't said in the actual movie. The synopsis does mention Suzume is 17. The other guy's probably like 19 or 20, so 2 to 3 year age difference. I don't know, 5 or 10 years ago, especially when I was growing up, that was not an issue. But I know Twitter, TikTok, and some places are definitely going to make a bigger deal out of this than it should be. But I don't know, am I wrong on this? Something else notable from the movie is that you've noticed from the last 2 movies, Shinkai likes to address specific disasters, natural disasters in his movies. And I think the one he's trying to address in this movie, which isn't explicitly said but hinted at, is the tsunami from like a decade ago. I recall seeing some visuals, some pictures of the disaster, and there's some animation visuals here that almost resemble that, I want to say 1-to-1. Who knows, maybe Shinkai will reveal that in some interviews. For cameos, I wanted to say I'm not going to spoil them, and I tried to double check, but maybe I just missed it, but I didn't spot any of them. The only thing that I can confirm is that one of the side characters is voiced by a different character from a previous movie. And no, they're not the same character. So final thoughts, I did wake up early, pay my $20 to go see this, right before I gotta fly like at 6 a.m. tomorrow. I'm trying to do actual number scores, and I think I'm gonna give this a 7. It's good, it's enjoyable, but among Kimi no Na wa and Weathering with You, I think it ranks in 3rd, unfortunately. Which, just for reference, those might be like a 9 for me. Please don't try to hate me. I wanted to love this. Unfortunately, I didn't. But I do think it's still worth a watch. Go ahead and check out my latest review on SEO Progressive, the second movie. Post your questions below, and I'll see you guys later. See ya.